All right, good morning, YouTube. Coffee Talk with me, episode number 8. I've got Ruby the cat right over here. She's staring at me, wanting me to go pet her right now. So this is kind of funny. I've got a cat just staring me down as I'm trying to talk to you and sip on my coffee. Okay, so what I want to talk about today, finally, let's get into something really fun, hopefully. Electronics. I want to talk a bit about electronics and just try to go basics without any real difficult math or complicated crazy stuff. And I hope that yesterday's talk leads into this one in a good way, because what we're dealing with here now is pure science. And when you apply that to our craft of making electronic music, you're going to deal with a lot of marketing jargon. In fact, anything in the audio industry is rifled with marketing jargon. In fact, we've got a mockingbird over here throwing marketing jargon at us as we speak. And I'm not sure if those are cicadas in the background or these sort of June beetles that we have. I think it's the June beetles. They're pretty funny, but okay. So what I want to talk about with electronics, I guess, starting out is, my initial experiences with electronics, how I was unable to understand. I can't really remember much about my interest or lack of interest or exposure to electronics as a child. I just remember that electricity scared the crap out of me. And at one point when I was about 18 years old, I was electrocuted by 110 volts of alternating current, and that was literally a shocker. It hurt. It wasn't, that bad. I didn't know what to compare it to. It was like the first time anything like that had happened. It just happened to me. It felt like something basically just knocked the crap out of me, and it didn't throw me across the room. Now looking back, I believe because it was alternating current, I just got one side of the one side of the cycle. And then when it flipped back to the other phase, it let go of me. So it was a very quick, instantaneous. Hey, what's happening? Good morning.
How's it going?
I'm doing all right. All right, that was the first. Got sort of interrupted by a neighbor. So much I should talk about that. She's going to get some food for her moths that are about to hatch. And I need to show you these moths sometime, but maybe I won't be able to do that. And but one of them that they hatched recently, I didn't realize this. These particular moths, I think it was from Madagascar. And when they hatch, when the caterpillar hatches, or when it goes into the cocoon and then hatches as a butterfly, or these moths, excuse me, they don't have mouths. These certain moths, and they die within 2 or 3 days. So she had to kill this moth that she hatched last night. Lived for about a week. I saw it when it was alive. Beautiful moth, and well cared for and taken care of in safety. Lived for a week, as I said before, I think. If they're out in the wild, my neighbor said they live for about 2 to 3 days because they expend all of their energy flapping about, flying around, laying eggs. And that's basically their only purpose at that point, is to go around, lay eggs, and die. So it's kind of a sad existence in a way, but think about that for a second. Like, what a wild existence to be a caterpillar, and then to go into this cocoon stage where you literally transform, like a phoenix rising out of the ashes. And literally you only have 2 or 3 days to live. And then you die of starvation, or something eats you, which, Okay, so back to electronics, and I got shocked. And then after that, that was after I had started playing drums, and I was definitely getting into music production. And that was an early thing that I wanted to get into, but how do you get into music production, right? Who do you go talk to? You need to have support, and I don't want to get into this, I'm not blaming anybody, but my parents, they just weren't, I don't want to say they weren't there for that kind of support. That's not fair, but they didn't know anything about that kind of stuff. So they didn't know who to talk to, what avenues, and even if they did, it probably wasn't going to happen anyways. That's just how it goes sometimes. So it wasn't until I had that second opportunity that I talked about in a past episode where I was able to study audio engineering, audio production, recording industry management, whatever you want to call it. And since I was on the tech side of things, the professors and instructors definitely stressed that we should learn more about electronics. In fact, last night I went back and I did a little research, not research, but just a little, background digging on one of my old professors, just because the link was there and I read the page, on the university website, and I saw that he studied electronics, and I really didn't appreciate that at the time. What am I trying to say? What I'm trying to say is that, like, in the program, they were like just not able to just, okay, here you go, we're going to start talking about electronics. It just doesn't work that way. You need bread. I mean, there's a whole electrical engineering class that you can take to really focus on that kind of stuff, and that's where you get the skills. And what's funny is that we actually did have sort of avenues to where we could take the intro to electronics courses. I didn't. I kind of felt like I didn't even have the basic building blocks to begin to understand electronics, and I didn't. And I kind of feel like they were definitely not going to be able to teach me those things even if I went there. And probably we're not going to be able to. At that program, we had one elective course that we could take that was introduced to us later on in the semester, and it was a sort of intro to electronics, but it was under the recording industry department and not the electronics or the electrical engineering department, which matters for what it's worth. But the part that doesn't matter for a student is that you can just get information. You can learn skills and learn stuff. So in this course, we had a great professor. He wasn't a professor, he was just like an adjunct instructor. He understood electronics, and he understood that he was not going to be able to teach us the traditional ways that he was taught. He was like, this is I think it was only like a two hour course. So very light, and we had one project. We had to build a cable tester. It was a cable box, it was an electronic project box that was a cable tester. And it would test XLR, quarter inch, and RCA. That was it. Back then, 1/8 inch jacks were definitely not popular. I'm sure they were around, but not so popular. Not even for headphones, I don't think. I think the early Walkman cassette players, the early crappy headphones that we had, the really small ones that went over ear and had like the thin extractable band and so forth, those used the mini jacks. So he gave us the schematic, and he gave us really good instructions on how to build it. And really the only problems I had in building it were drilling the holes. I ended up getting a crack in the project enclosure. But my project worked, but I was thoroughly unsatisfied because I had no idea how it worked. And that was my big fundamental hurdle against the barrier against me learning electronics, is because I understood that I could do these formulas, voltage equals current divided by resistance, all this kind of stuff, I'm sorry. No, voltage is current times resistance. And so that would be, I don't want to think about it right now. So yeah, current is voltage divided by resistance. Yeah, VIR. Anyways, see, that's what I'm saying. It's all of that stuff is necessary. I was always unsatisfied, and I never wanted to take electronics courses because I knew all they're going to do is just show us all of these complicated circuits of resistors in series and parallel. We'd have to calculate the resistances and the voltages, and I just kept saying to myself, yeah, but why? Why am I going to use that? I kept looking at these example circuits, not understanding that they were metaphors. One of the big aha moments in learning this stuff is when you realize why they're teaching you that stuff early on at the beginning. There's always lab courses where you go and you apply this stuff. I think that's the part that I didn't realize, is that there were labs, and when you go to the labs, you get to get behind a breadboard and actually physically touch this stuff for yourself and understand what happens when you touch these two components together. That's vital. It's super, super vital. And it is a big aha moment when you're actually getting hands-on experience. That's when you find most of the aha moments. And even though you get aha moments when you're reading the material, it's probably because you had that seed planted from physical experience and touching something a day or a week prior to that. So I was very unsatisfied that I could not understand how this cable tester worked. You know, it had like 3 LEDs to show when each of the 3 conductors were made a proper connection. And we also had a couple switches. Why am I apologizing for that? Anyways, we had a few switches to toggle them being on and off, because it's very important when you're testing for intermittency. And yeah, I mean, looking at it now, it's great because I can think to myself, wow, I could actually sit down and design this from scratch and understand how it works. And the key is understanding current flow. So we are taught signal flow as audio engineers, music producers, whatever you want to call yourself, you know, as a music production person, hardware jammer, you know, doll crafter, doll sculptor. That's what I like to call producing music with the DAW, is you're sort of like sculpting pottery. You know, you start out and then you just keep going through iterations and keep smoothing and making it better and better, more perfect and perfect. And the big con in that, the downside, is that it's real easy to never finish, to just keep continually improving and never, as Frank Zappa said, put that frame around it, call it art, and just pass it off to the world and walk away and let the fans decide what it is. But so yeah, it's understanding current flow. That's the key. That's kind of what I think I want to talk about first. Is that's my big dissatisfaction in trying to understand this stuff would be not understanding the function, the purpose of current. What is the function? What is the purpose of voltage? Resistance we can kind of understand a little bit. I mean, it's not too difficult to kind of start to wrap your head around resistance, but until you have that big aha moment, you really don't understand the function and purpose of resistance. It's not just to slow down the flow of current, even though that's what it does. Well, it's, you know, yeah, there's applications that can be derived from that function. This is the cool thing about electronics. It's like when you really get in and study this stuff. And I recommend that if you do, I mean, of course I'm going to recommend you do it the way that I did it, because how else can I recommend anything? But, you know, I really think I did a really good job of this. I think I did a great job in figuring out the different silos within electrical engineering, one of them being audio engineering itself, and why it's very difficult to find people who can explain this to you, who are willing to talk about this, who are willing to sort of divulge some of these secrets that are not secrets. That's the cool part, because it's science, you see. Because this is science, there doesn't have to be any mystery at all to synthesis. Seriously. None. I'd say the only danger is, you know, losing some of the magic, right? Because that's the cool part about music, is that it's magical. Thank you, Mr. Cicada, or Junebug, whatever you are. They sound really cool, don't they? They're very percussive. It's kind of like a guero fish. In fact, you're listening to trap hi-hats right now. Yeah. Again, that's another thing I want. If I had a rant, that I would rant all over trap hi-hats. Please stop doing that crap. Seriously, just scattering your hi-hat. I mean, it's really annoying, and you're going to regret it when you go back and listen to your music that you're using with it now. And 10 years, 2 years from now, the way things are changing. Stop using trends. Be your own trend. Okay, enough of that. So, current flow is different than just signal flow. And if you're having a hard time wrapping your head around electronics, one of the reasons is probably because you're trying to think of it as signal flow. You're trying to think of how the current goes through the circuit as you will with signal flow. And no. Signal flow is an abstraction. It's an abstraction to simplify the complexity of what happens, not just within a circuit, but when you integrate, when you interface, when you couple two circuits together, when you couple three circuits together. So it removes a lot of the complexity with having to learn a lot of this stuff, although I kind of think we should learn this stuff first, to tell you the truth. It's kind of like, if you want to write songs, why would you not learn music theory? And just a disclaimer, I'm not a songwriter, so I don't need to learn music theory. Someday, hopefully, I will learn music theory, but it's just not, electronics, in my opinion, way more cooler to learn than music theory. Music theory is probably a lot easier to learn. One of the reasons why I haven't learned music theory, same reason why I didn't learn electronics necessarily, is because I'm not satisfied with the way it's being educated to us. So, kind of take my own path and try to figure stuff out. And the reason why I'm able to do that is because of my skills I learned from college. The most important thing you can learn from being in college is to learn how to learn. Is to learn how to teach yourself. And that's really what I think the professors, within their heart, that's what they're wanting you to learn. It's not necessarily what the administrators are managing their instructors and professors to teach, but all the instructors and teachers, when they're up there, they want you to learn how to learn deep down inside. And if you can figure that out for yourself, you can learn anything. I could start learning nuclear physics, but nope. I like music. I like music because it's peaceful. It can be peaceful. It pleases people. And as a drummer, it's great because I can just make a bunch of noise, and turn that into a musical kind of thing without any electricity whatsoever. And it makes a lot of noise. It's very loud. As we get more and more into the future, it looks like everything's going more and more digital, which means electrical, which means electricity, which means you should learn electronics. And I know it's hard. I'll talk in another video more about like my 4 kind of step things, 4 areas of approaching, sort of 4 pillars that you build up if you really want to learn electronics. But a couple things maybe I can leave you with, don't already understand this stuff, that might kind of help. So I used to get pretty irate and mad because I would express in various chat forums or whatever, I'm trying to learn electronics, and man, it just bugs me because I can't understand, like really, when I would say, I didn't know how to say this, so I would just say the difference between voltage and current. And I'd get some wisecracker come up and say, oh, it's just, voltage is just the potential between blah, 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 and current is just the rate at which the blood, it's like, I know that. I mean, seriously, you think I can't go to, we're on the computer. You think I can't go and find the definition of current and voltage, right? I'm like, really? We have kind of come to that, you know what I mean? Where it's like, wow. So when you talking to a stranger on the internet, it's like, here, let me hold your hand and show you how to use the internet, even though you're on the internet. It's like, really, you can get on the internet, but you can't search a definition of a word. That's what I'm saying. So it would frustrate me to know. And again, I realize I'm being a little bit unfair because the person on the other end doesn't know who I am. But a lot of times I would come to find out that the person who's giving me this answer, they don't know jack about electronics in the first place. Okay, so here's the real deal. Voltage is communication. Voltage is communication. Current is realization. Realization. You know, the actual taking the theoretical concept or notion of something and actually making it a real physical force in our world that is a vector. See what I'm saying? Voltage is not a vector. Current is a vector. What's amazing is that, see, with voltage, you can create communication. Sure, voltage is used for power, but so is current. That's the thing that I'm talking about, is that when you study a circuit and you want to analyze it in terms of signal flow, you have a separation. You have the current path for the signal, and you have the various current paths for power to all of your active components that process the signal. It's a lot to go over, and it helps if I could visualize that. Maybe I can say it one more time. You can always go back. But, you know, you have two different signals, essentially. The signal that you're interested in, and all the power that needs to process that signal. So like your transistors and your operational amplifiers and other integrated circuits, they require power. And this is where it gets really, really, really cool. Like when you start to like really realize what's going on, man. I don't know. I'd say like you either just go shrieking back into your little bubble of false reality because it's very uncomfortable. You realize how incorrect a lot of your notions have been, or you just free yourself of all this dogma. So we'll talk some more, a little bit more about this later. I don't think it's time to just wrap up just right yet. I feel like there's maybe a little bit more a couple other things I can talk about here. Yeah. So when you are powering, so that usually in these circuits, when you, the power that is needed by these active components to process your signal needs direct current. The signal in question that we're processing is alternating current. Now, the power that comes into your household or your studio or your commercial residence or your commercial, whatever it is alternating current. These wires that you can't see above me and so forth. The power wires, they bring in 120 and 220. I'm not sure where it gets stepped down, if it's two different lines and the transformer up there that steps it down, or if there's another one, wherever it is, you get 220, 110. If you're in Europe, it's 220 only, which is wild. But, don't worry too much about these details. And so but the important thing is that you're like, no, wait a second. So we've got this power that comes in, it's AC, but our signal is also AC. Yeah. It's pretty wild, huh? So, but in terms of power, don't worry too much about the AC versus DC stuff. It's cool, and I can totally teach you that. But really right now, we're just kind of focused on just, coming in from a signal processing viewpoint, from a signal flow viewpoint, where you're only thinking about, you've got an input and an output, and it's a black box. Your signal comes in, your signal goes out. And this also applies to you folks out there who are like software engineers, not computer engineers. You guys get this stuff, but software engineers. So real quick aside, so where computer engineers might not understand is when they get in terms of, okay, like audio, the realms of audiophile, like when you talk about electronics and you want things to sound as best as they can sound. That's where people in other industries, other silos of the electronic engineering pool, whatever, that's where they may be a little bit in the dark. But it doesn't take very long to figure out what's going on. Really honestly, it would take them no time to understand that. They've got all the building blocks they need, and it's just, oh, okay, got it. Okay, yep. I think it is kind of a shame that these silos don't necessarily conspire against each other to prevent information from being shared on this level, but information is not necessarily being shared on this level as well as it should be, in my opinion. Okay, so, but back to my point, is that as a software engineer, yeah, you may want to understand, like, okay, here you go. Here's a great way for you to get into electronics, is to work with some, first just get a shift register. You know what a shift register is? Like if you took assembly language and you wrote anything, like you directly work with a shift register to get your values back and forth that you then put into RAM and take it into ROM, or well, not ROM, take out a ROM and maybe put into RAM or whatever. Get a shift register and hook up some LEDs and figure out how to make the LEDs do like a snake, like one line flashing or whatever. They're all on and one of them turns off and goes down the road. That's a cool little exercise to start to, that's a cool goal to have to work towards so you can understand electronics. Sorry, I'm just trying to think, like, is there, what would be another analogy for like people, like synthesizer people? Back to computer engineering, software engineering. So another really good one is to work with transistors. Now, inevitably, you're probably going to destroy a few transistors in trying this. Don't worry about it. It happens. Get some cheap transistors. They're like 2 cents a piece. Like some super, super cheap NPN transistors. And figure out how to set up logic gates. OR gates, AND gates, XOR. It's really cool. You don't even need to buy these things. You can go and just study online and search, for logic gates using transistors, and try to wrap your head around how they work, because it's not what you think. It's not what if you look at a transistor and you see, okay, it's got an input and it's got 2 outputs, you're immediately going to think that one input is true and one output is false, right? Because it's like, that's how no, that's not how it works. It's really cool. It's a matter, here's where you do have to use a water analogy. And I kind of hate the water analogy because everybody just grabs for it first. But it really is more of thinking of having a bunch of streams and diverging streams so that you take away water and you put water down these avenues. Sometimes like water will flow and sometimes you'll take away the flow. And it's the presence or absence of this flowing water that determines logic, truth or false. Yeah. It starts to turn into a really cool rabbit hole. And from what I understand, the ultimate rabbit hole is when you really start to diverge into fast Fourier transforms, where the analog becomes digital and the digital becomes analog. That will really blow your head away, and you'll never care about a digital versus analog argument again. You're just like, okay, well, what's the application? Right? You say like digital versus analog, that's an invalid argument. What's the application? Now we can apply the better of the two. The one that has the better qualities, I should say. Or the one that has the more desired qualities. Because it's not better, it's not worse. It's what you desire. See what I did there? So, it's I'm probably going to have to talk about this some more. I knew this was going to happen. It's a lot of information to wrap your head around to understand how a synthesizer really works. But when you do, oh my God, it's just, it's great. Okay, so enough about that. You say, like, how do I do it? Sign me up. Where do I go? Okay. What I did, now I will have a disclaimer. I do have a software engineering background, and I definitely think that helped to a degree. The only reason why that helped is because from my profession, I have acquired a skill of problem solving. That's what helped me to understand electronics, is just basic problem solving skills. And what that is, what I wish I could teach you right now, is the ability to gain feedback. So in other words, when I do something, I want to be able to see what the reaction is. As long as I can see what that reaction is, then I can learn from that. But if I can't see what that reaction is, right? So you always have to have that. That's your sort of goal when you're problem solving. It's like, okay, it's not working. All right, why is it not working? Well, every time we do this, it doesn't turn on. Okay, well, let's start unplugging things, right? You see what I'm saying? You start figuring out a way to gain visibility, and that gives you your feedback loop so that you can see if you're getting on the right track or if you're not getting anything at all. And that is the basic skill that I use to help me understand electronics. The other thing was just a lot of hard work and a lot of time. I did this at a time when I could. If you have a full-time job right now and a family to take care of and you've got all these hobbies, you're not going to have the time to do this. You need to have time because you really need to invest a lot of consecutive hours so that you can have these aha moments that I'm talking about. But if you do want to do this, what I recommend is you buy an Arduino Starter Kit, like on Amazon, wherever. They're 15, 16 bucks. They're just under $20. Get the one that does not include the Arduino. It just has a breadboard, some capacitors, resistors, a couple transistors, some LEDs, some buzzers, some jumpers, and like a little power thing that you can use to power the breadboard with. And they come with some instructions, some things to get you started. See, it's to get into this, you have to be a little bit brave. You have to understand that, you know, it is you are trailblazing into the wild unknown on your own, and people are there to help you, but you've got to sort of find them. And you have to figure out which ones you want to help you and which ones you don't want to help you. That's very important. When I came to YouTube, I found there are hundreds of teachers, maybe not hundreds, but there's definitely almost like a list of 100 teachers here on YouTube that you can find instructions about electronics. And what I found is that some of them, the way they spoke resonated with me, and others it repelled me. So I think it's very important for you to not be distracted by a handful of instructors who you feel maybe snobbish. I don't, you know, there's all kinds of things. They're too arrogant for you, or they're just, or they're not arrogant enough for you, perhaps even. You know, they're not, you know, like correct and precise. You need it. You know, you want that totally scientific. See what I'm saying? There's the far end of the spectrum. I'm going to mostly try to stay, like, even though I'm a man of science, when I'm talking about this stuff, I just want to talk about it. That's kind of what I think I want to bring to the table, apart from when I can actually give some good demonstrations using synthesizers, etc., which I've already done. I've already put out a number of videos, and you know, the production quality is terrible. I get it, but hey, it's free. You know, you get what you pay for. So it just takes some of your time. Okay, on that, I think it's probably time to wrap this up. I hope this has been beneficial for you. This is the direction that I want these talks to go in, by the way. I just want to shake off some people in the process. Bye-bye, YouTube. The club is almost open. But I left my vacuum tubes behind.